My brother looked me straight in the eye and said I was nothing more than a glorified babysitter in scrubs, that I'd never contributed anything meaningful to this family, and that I needed to pack my things and leave our parents' house by the end of the week. He had no idea that 5 years later he'd be standing in the hospital corridor begging me to save his wife's life, and I'd be the one with the power to say no. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, from the day everything fell apart. I was 62 years old when my mother died. My father had passed just 18 months earlier, and Mom had held on as long as she could, but the cancer finally took her on a gray Tuesday morning in March. I was there, holding her hand, just like I'd held Dad's hand when his heart finally gave out. That's what nurses do. We hold hands, we witness. We stay when everyone else has somewhere more important to be. My brother Robert showed up 2 hours after Mom took her last breath. He'd been in Seattle at some tech conference, or so he said. Robert was always at some conference, always closing some deal, always too busy for the small, quiet moments that make up a life. He rushed into the hospice room still wearing his expensive suit, smelling of airplane and cologne, and he looked at me sitting there beside Mom's bed like I was part of the furniture. "Why didn't you call me sooner?" he demanded. "I was too tired to fight. I called you 6 hours ago, Robert. I told you it was time. I was in a meeting. I couldn't just—" He stopped himself, looked at our mother's peaceful face, and something in him softened for maybe 3 seconds. Then his phone buzzed, and he stepped into the hallway to take the call. I sat with Mom for another hour, just the two of us, like it had been for most of the past 2 years. I'd taken a leave from my job at the hospital to care for her full-time after Dad died. Someone had to do it. Robert had a demanding career in software development. His wife Jennifer couldn't possibly be expected to handle that kind of responsibility with her charity work and tennis lessons. So it fell to me, the unmarried sister, the one without children or a mortgage or anything more important than a nursing career I'd built over 40 years. Not that I regretted it, I didn't. Those 2 years with Mom were precious to me. I learned things about my parents I'd never known, heard stories about their courtship, about the depression, about the small acts of courage that made up their lives. Robert missed all of it because he was too busy being important. The funeral was on Saturday. Robert handled all the arrangements, which meant he hired people to handle all the arrangements while he made phone calls and checked his email. He gave a eulogy that sounded like he'd gotten it from a template online. She was a wonderful mother, always there for us, taught us the value of hard work. Standard stuff that could have been about anyone's mother. I didn't give a eulogy. I couldn't. Every time I tried to practice what I'd say, I'd start crying and couldn't stop. So I sat in the front pew and let Robert have his moment. Let him be the successful son, the one who made something of himself, while I was just the daughter who'd spent her life taking care of other people. The reading of the will happened the following Tuesday. Mom's attorney, old Mr. Patterson, gathered us in his office and went through the document page by page. The house went to Robert. The car went to Robert. Mom's savings, what little was left after Dad's medical bills and her own end-of-life care, went to Robert. There was a small amount, $15,000, set aside for me in recognition of her devoted care. $15,000. For 2 years of my life. For bathing my mother when she couldn't do it herself, for changing sheets at 3 a.m, for holding the bucket when the chemo made her violently ill, for singing her the old songs when the pain was too much and she needed something, anything, to focus on besides the dying. Robert got a house worth $300,000 and another $100,000 in savings and investments. I got a tip. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part came later that evening when Robert called me. "We need to talk about the house," he said. I was exhausted. I'd been packing Mom's clothes, trying to figure out what to donate and what to keep, touching her sweaters and crying into them like a teenager. "What about it?" "Jennifer and I have been discussing it, and we think it makes sense to sell it quickly. The market's good right now, and we don't need the hassle of maintaining a second property." "Okay," I said. I didn't care about the house. I cared about Mom's reading glasses still on the nightstand and her coffee cup still in the sink. "The thing is," Robert continued, and I heard that careful tone he used when he was about to say something he knew I wouldn't like, "we need to put it on the market next week, which means you need to be out by this weekend." I stopped folding the sweater in my hands. "What?" I know it's sudden, but the realtor says we'll get the best price if we list it now, before the spring rush, and obviously we can't show it with all your stuff there. Robert, I've lived here for 2 years. All my things are here. I need time to find an apartment. 2 years that you volunteered for, he interrupted. Nobody asked you to move in and play nurse. You made that choice, and you got compensated for it, didn't you? Mom left you $15,000. That's more than enough for a deposit on an apartment. I couldn't breathe. Compensated? You think I took care of Mom for money? I think you made certain choices that put you in this position. You're 62 years old with no husband, no kids, no property of your own. That's not my fault. I have a family to take care of. I have a mortgage and college funds and retirement to think about. I can't afford to be sentimental about a house just because you're having feelings. Something broke inside me then. Something that had been cracking for years finally shattered completely. When's the last time you visited Mom? I asked quietly. What does that have to do? When, Robert? When's the last time you sat with her for more than 20 minutes? When's the last time you were there when she woke up scared in the middle of the night? When's the last time you held her hand while she cried because she missed Dad and she knew she was dying? Silence on the other end. That's what I thought, I said. I'll be out by Sunday. I hung up before he could respond. Then I sat on Mom's bed, in Mom's room, in the house where I'd grown up, and I cried until I had nothing left. That weekend was a blur. I rented a small storage unit for Mom's things, the ones Robert didn't want, which was most of them. I found a cheap studio apartment in a not great part of town, the only place I could afford on short notice. I packed my life into boxes and moved it all in one exhausting day with the help of 2 orderlies from the hospital who took pity on me. The studio was tiny. 400 square feet of beige carpet and fluorescent lighting. The bathroom was so small I could touch both walls while sitting on the toilet. The kitchenette consisted of a hot plate, a mini fridge, and a sink the size of a cereal bowl. My nursing school textbooks alone took up half the available shelf space. I sat on the second-hand futon I'd bought off Craigslist and looked around at my new life. This was it. This was what 40 years of nursing, of caring for others, of putting everyone else first had gotten me. A studio apartment in a building that smelled like old cooking oil and cigarettes, and a brother who couldn't even give me 2 weeks to grieve before kicking me out. I cried myself to sleep that night, and the next night, and the night after that. But eventually, the crying stopped. Eventually, something else took its place. Not anger exactly, I was too tired for anger. It was more like clarity, a cold, clear understanding that I had spent my entire life caring about people who didn't care about me in return. Robert didn't care. Jennifer certainly didn't care. Even Mom and Dad, who I'd loved deeply, had made it clear in their will that Robert was the important one, the one who deserved the house and the money and the security, while I got a thank you check and a pat on the head. So I made a decision. I decided to stop caring back. Not in a bitter way, not in a revenge way. I just decided to start living for myself for whatever time I had left. I went back to work at the hospital. My supervisor was kind enough to give me the ICU rotation I'd always wanted. I'd spent most of my career in med-surg, but intensive care was where I'd always felt most capable, most needed. There was something about the ICU that required your complete attention. You couldn't drift off or phone it in. Every patient was critical. Every decision mattered. Every moment counted. I was good at it. Better than good. Within 6 months, I was training new nurses. Within a year, I was the senior nurse on the night shift, the one the residents called when they weren't sure what to do, the one families asked for specifically because they'd heard I was the best. I found a strange kind of peace in that work. My patients needed me, truly needed me, and I could give them something that mattered. Not money, not a house, not an inheritance, just competence and compassion and presence. It turned out that was enough. I made friends with my coworkers, real friends, not just colleagues. Maria, a respiratory therapist with 3 kids and a wicked sense of humor. James, a resident who brought in homemade cookies once a week. Dr. Susan Chen, an intensivist who'd been working at the hospital for 20 years and knew everyone's story. We'd have coffee together in the break room during quiet moments. We'd celebrate each other's birthdays with grocery store cake. We'd cover each other's shifts when life happened, when Maria's kid got sick, when James had to study for boards, when I just needed a day to remember I was human. My little studio apartment became less depressing. I bought plant succulents that didn't need much care but made the place feel alive. I hung some of Mom's paintings on the walls, the small watercolors she'd done before her hands got too shaky. I got a cat from the shelter, an old grumpy tabby named Walter who'd been there for months because nobody wanted a senior cat. Walter and I understood each other. We were both past our prime, both a little beat up by life, both content to sit quietly in the evenings and not expect too much from the world. I didn't hear from Robert for 3 years. Not a call, not a text, not a Christmas card. The house sold for $320,000. I know because I looked it up online. I assume he and Jennifer used the money for something important, a kitchen remodel, maybe, or a vacation home. Good for them. I didn't miss him. That was the surprising part. I thought I would, but I didn't. Once I stopped waiting for him to be the brother I wanted him to be, once I stopped hoping he'd call to apologize or at least acknowledge what he'd done, I found I didn't really care about him at all. He was just a person I used to know, no more significant than an old classmate or a former neighbor. Life went on. I turned 63, then 64, then 65. I cut back my hours at the hospital to part-time. I started volunteering at a free clinic on Saturdays. I took a watercolor class at the community center and discovered I had Mom's talent for painting flowers. I wasn't lonely anymore. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. There's a difference. Then, on a Thursday evening in November, 3 years and 7 months after Mom's funeral, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Margaret? It's Robert. I didn't say anything. I literally couldn't think of a single word to say to him. Margaret, I need to talk to you. It's about Jennifer. His voice cracked. She's sick. She's very sick. I sat down on my futon, Walter jumping into my lap. I'm sorry to hear that. She's at Memorial Hospital. She's been there for 2 weeks. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. They're saying it's a matter of months. Maybe weeks. That's terrible, Robert. I'm very sorry. The thing is... He paused, and I heard him take a shaky breath. The thing is, they're saying she can go home on hospice. They've done everything they can here, but she needs full-time care. Someone who knows what they're doing. Someone who... Another pause. Someone like you. And there it was. The reason for the call. Not an apology, not an acknowledgement of what he'd done to me. Just another need, another demand, another assumption that I would drop everything to help. I see, I said quietly. I know it's a lot to ask. I know we haven't talked in a while. But you're family, Margaret. And you're the best nurse I know. Jennifer needs you. We need you. I looked around my small studio apartment, at Walter purring in my lap, at Mom's paintings on the wall, at the watercolors I'd been working on, still drying on the card table I used as a desk, at the life I'd built from nothing after Robert had thrown me away like garbage. I'm sorry, Robert, I said, but I don't think I can help you. What? What do you mean you can't help? She's dying, Margaret. My wife is dying. I understand that. And I'm very sorry. But I have commitments. I work at the hospital. I volunteer at the clinic. I have a life here. A life? He actually laughed, a short, bitter sound. What life? You live in some tiny apartment by yourself. You don't have a husband or kids. What could possibly be more important than helping family? There it was, the same contempt, the same dismissal. Nothing had changed. He still saw me as less than, as someone whose time and energy and life didn't matter unless he needed something. Robert, I said, very calmly, very clearly, do you remember what you said to me after Mom died? You said I was just a glorified babysitter in scrubs. You said I'd never contributed anything meaningful to the family. You gave me 6 days to get out of my home so you could sell it. You haven't called me once in almost 4 years. Not on my birthday, not on holidays, not to check if I was okay. And now you call because you need something, and you're actually surprised that I'm not jumping to help you? Silence. I worked in intensive care for 40 years, Robert. I've held the hands of dying patients, and I've supported their families through the worst moments of their lives. It's hard work. It's heartbreaking work. It's important work. And I'm good at it. But I don't do it for people who treat me like I'm worthless. Not anymore. Margaret, please, I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry for what I said. I was stressed. I didn't mean. Yes, you did. You meant every word. And you know what? That's fine. You're entitled to your opinion of me. But I'm entitled to my opinion too. And my opinion is that I don't owe you anything. Not my time, not my expertise, not my compassion. You made it very clear that I'm not really part of your family. So no, I will not take care of Jennifer. That's not cruelty. That's just boundaries. You're going to let my wife die because you're holding a grudge? No, Robert. I'm going to let you figure out how to care for your wife the same way I had to figure out how to care for our parents, alone. And if you're lucky, you'll learn what I learned, that the people who are there for you in the hard times are your real family. Blood doesn't mean much when it's not backed up by love and respect. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear or guilt. From something else. Something that felt almost like freedom. He called back 5 times that night. I didn't answer. He called the hospital the next day and tried to get to me through my supervisor. She came to find me during my shift, looking uncomfortable. "There's a man claiming to be your brother causing a scene in the lobby," she said. "Should I call security?" "No," I said. "I'll handle it." I found Robert in the main lobby, pacing back and forth, his expensive suit wrinkled, his face haggard. He looked 10 years older than the last time I'd seen him. "Margaret, thank God. Listen, I know I screwed up. I know I was terrible to you. But please, you have to help us. Jennifer is—" "I know what Jennifer is," I said quietly. "I work here, remember? I saw her chart. I know exactly how sick she is. Then you understand why I need you. I understand why you want me. That's different. Robert, there are excellent hospice services available. There are home health aides, visiting nurses, support groups. Jennifer will get good care, but not your care. Not the best care." I looked at my brother, really looked at him, maybe for the first time in years. He was terrified. His wife was dying and he was absolutely terrified, and he had no idea how to cope with it. Part of me, the old part, the part that had spent a lifetime taking care of people, wanted to comfort him, wanted to say, "Yes, of course I'll help, of course I'll drop everything and save you from this hard thing." But I didn't. Because I'd learned something in the 3 years since Mom's funeral. I'd learned that you can't save people from life. You can only walk beside them while they figure out how to save themselves. "I'm sorry about Jennifer," I said. "I really am. But my answer is still no. Not because I don't care about her suffering, but because I care about my own. I spent 2 years caring for Mom while you lived your life, and when she died, you threw me away. You don't get to throw me away and then pick me back up when you find me useful again. That's not how relationships work. So that's it? You're just going to walk away?" "No, Robert. You're the one who walked away. I'm just refusing to follow you anymore." I turned and went back to my floor, back to my patients, back to my life, and I didn't look back. The weeks that followed were hard, not because I felt guilty I didn't, but because it's never easy to watch someone suffer, even someone who hurt you. Through the hospital grapevine, I heard about Jennifer's decline. She went home on hospice. Robert hired round-the-clock aides, spent a fortune on care. I heard he took a leave from work to be with her. She died 6 weeks after that conversation in the lobby. I sent flowers to the funeral, but I didn't attend. I said a prayer for her soul and for Robert's grief, and then I went on with my life. 3 months after Jennifer's death, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten, on nice paper. Robert's handwriting. "Dear Margaret," it began. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I deserve to be forgiven. But I need to say some things, even if you never respond." The letter went on for 3 pages. He wrote about those final weeks with Jennifer, about bathing her and changing her sheets and holding her hand, about how impossibly hard it was, how exhausting, how heartbreaking, about the moments when she was in pain and he felt so helpless, so inadequate, about the night she died, when he was alone with her because the aide had stepped out, and how he'd held her while she took her last breath. "I finally understand," he wrote. "I understand what you did for Mom and Dad. I understand what I took from you, what I dismissed so casually. You gave them years of your life. You gave them dignity and comfort and love. and I gave them. What? Money? Visits? A eulogy? He wrote about going through Jennifer's things afterward, about finding the notes she'd written to him, about one note in particular that she'd left for him to find. Be kinder to your sister. She was right about everything. I was wrong, the letter concluded. About you, about what matters, about everything. You said blood doesn't mean much without love and respect, and you were right. I didn't love you the way a brother should. I didn't respect you the way you deserved. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. But I understand if you don't. I understand that I broke something that can't be fixed. Love, Robert. I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it in a drawer and didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because I wasn't sure what to say. Sorry didn't give me back those 2 years with my parents. Sorry didn't give me back the relationship I'd wanted with my brother. Sorry was just a word. But 6 months later, when I was painting in my apartment on a Saturday morning, I found myself thinking about that letter, about Robert holding Jennifer while she died, about him finally understanding, even if it came too late to matter. I picked up my phone and sent a text. Thank you for the letter. I'm not ready to be close again. Maybe someday, but I accept your apology. He texted back immediately. Thank you. That's more than I deserve. And maybe it was. But it was also enough. I didn't need a relationship with Robert. I had learned to live without him, and I was happy. But I also didn't need to carry around anger about him anymore. I could just let him be a person who hurt me once, who learned something from it, who was trying to be better. That was his journey, not mine. I'm 67 now. I retired from the hospital last year. I still volunteer at the free clinic. I still paint watercolors. I still have Walter, who's somehow still kicking despite the vet's dire predictions. I have friends who call me just to chat. I have neighbors who invite me over for dinner. I have a life that's small and quiet and completely my own. Robert and I exchange texts occasionally. Short things, nothing deep. Happy birthday. How are you? Nice weather we're having. We're not close, and we probably never will be. But we're not enemies either. We're just 2 people who share some DNA and some history, trying to be civil. And I've realized that's okay. Not every relationship can be saved or should be saved. Some people come into your life to teach you what you don't want, who you don't want to be. Robert taught me that I don't want to be someone who lets other people define my worth. He taught me that family is what you make it, not just who you're born to. He taught me that it's okay to say no, even when saying no feels selfish, because taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. I learned my worth in a tiny studio apartment with a grumpy cat and a job that pays me just enough to get by. I learned it from patients who thanked me for holding their hands. I learned it from coworkers who became friends. I learned it from the quiet satisfaction of painting a flower that looks almost real. And I learned it from saying no to my brother, from choosing myself for once, from setting a boundary and keeping it even when it was hard. They say living well is the best revenge, but I don't think that's quite right. Living well isn't revenge at all. It's just living. It's just deciding that your life matters, that your peace matters, that your time on this earth is valuable even if nobody's watching, even if nobody's applauding, even if nobody's benefiting except you. That's what I do now. I live. Not for Robert, not for anyone's approval, not to prove a point, just for me. And it turns out that's enough. More than enough. It's everything.